Recording button is on. Okay. Yay, I did it. Oh, let me go back to my script. Okay. If you would like to change your Zoom to speaker view, you can just see the speakers, or you can see all of our beautiful faces, whatever you choose to do. The format of this session will be informational and then Q&A towards the end. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize the Tongva tribe. The Tongva are the first people of the land where the University of La Verne resides. Let's take a moment to recognize them. Thank you. I would also like to take a moment to honor the lives of the people who were lost due to the coronavirus. Thank you. It is affecting everyone. Let us take a moment to recognize our essential workers. Thank you for your service. This event was born out of the need to discuss how the coronavirus disproportionately affects communities of color. In October, we hosted the COVID in the Latinx community, where Dominique Stevens was able to co-present with Dr. James Garcia. Thank you for that. During that event, Dr. Samantha Lamartine, who is a member of the panel today, sent me a direct message and said that we need to do this for the Black community. So here we are. Thank you for that, Dr. Lamartine. Now let me introduce our presenters. Dr. Lamartine is a postdoctoral fellow at Boston Medical Center. She is an American Psychological Association, APA, Minority Fellowship Program Fellow, and the current treasurer of APA Division 35, Section 1, the Psychology of Black Women. Samantha has 9 years of counseling experience across a variety of treatment settings, such as community-based, outpatient, and inpatient hospitals, including forensics. Dr. Lamartine's areas of expertise include adult development, trauma, substance use disorder, mood disorder, and borderline personality disorder. Dr. Lamartine engages a variety of approaches that are culturally competent, patient-focused, and strengths-based in her work with patients from marginalized social backgrounds. Dr. Lamartine's research interests include examining the effects of discrimination, violence, microaggressions, physical and sexual altercations, and racism on minoritized trans and cisgender communities. She has co-authored an article on HIV and trans women of color, presented research at national conventions on health disparities among sexual, gender, and racial minoritized groups, and participated in roundtable discussions on mental health for community organizations such as the NAACP Boston chapter. She is interested in and committed to reducing mental health stigma and increasing utilization of and access to culturally responsive mental health services among Black communities, particularly girls and women. Let's give Dr. Lamartine a warm welcome. Dominique Stevens is an honors student in the doctoral program in clinical psychology at the University of La Verne. She is an IE native, completing her general education from Chaffey College before transferring and graduating from the University of California, Irvine. Her research experience focuses on health disparities and social experiences among Black, biracial, Latinx, LGBTQ+ communities. Dominique has done multiple presentations on the effects of COVID-19 in the Latinx community. She is a member of the APA Division Psychology of Black Women and Concerns of Hispanic Women Latinas. Dominique has completed a clinical internship with the Department of Mental Health in LA County and currently teaches a psychology course to high school students from the Boston Area Health Education Center. Her goal is to become a licensed psychologist working with children, teenagers, and couples in a therapy setting, and teach psychology courses at a university with the emphasis of cultural competency. Let's give them a big Leo welcome. And now I will make you host.
Okay, I'm just gonna share my screen. Wait,
There you go.
thank you. Um, okay, I should know how to work Zoom.
It's okay. The perils of technology. We'll hang in there.
Um, Hi everyone, and thank you so much, Misty, for such a warm introduction. And welcome everyone. We're so very grateful that you were able to take time out of your schedules to join Dominique and I as we talk to you, give you some information about COVID-19 within the Black communities. Dominique and I are hoping for this presentation to be interactive. And so we encourage you throughout the presentation, please utilize the chat box, and however you might be feeling, if something resonates with you, we encourage you to use the chat box to engage with each other.
Okay, and then just to touch on the agenda. So first we're gonna go over COVID-19 and the facts about it. I know we're all pretty familiar with it by now, but just to touch on it. And then we're gonna talk about its effects on the Black community. And then we'll go into vaccination, which leads us to the cultural mistrust portion. And then we're gonna go into the discussion where hopefully you guys can just let us know how you're feeling about everything.
To begin, I mean, this past year has been overwhelming, and that's probably an understatement. In addition to COVID, ongoing racism and racial unjust, and then also too to the very violent acts that occurred at the Capitol back January 6th, there's just a lot, like we're dealing with a lot. And so just to help ground you to this activity or to this presentation, Dominique and I thought it might be kind of like a neat activity just to help ground you as we prepare or as we go into this discussion. And so I invite you all to, if you feel comfortable to participate, if you don't, that's okay. If you feel comfortable or if you'd rather have your camera off, please do that. Just do whatever you need to do to make sure that you're comfortable. Okay. So as you settle into this exercise, take a moment to notice what's around you. You might notice the room that you're in. You might notice where you are sitting and the way you're sitting. I ask that you find a comfortable position. Take a moment to adjust your position if needed. Now I invite you to close your eyes or have a soft, gentle gaze down at the ground. The first step of this exercise is being aware of what's going through your mind. Notice if the mind is active with a lot of thoughts, or perhaps there is one repeating thought. Maybe there are concerns or worries about the future. It may be helpful to picture yourself looking up at a sky, and each thought that comes in your mind is a cloud. There may be a lot of clouds, or perhaps just a few clouds. But just like clouds that float through the sky, thoughts come and go. Practice observing your thoughts from a distance, without judgment, without feeling pulled into them. As you notice the thoughts, also notice any feelings you may be experiencing in the moment. It would be understandable to be feeling overwhelmed, feeling on edge, maybe even feelings of panic at times. Rather than trying to push these uncomfortable feelings away or shut them out, see if you can observe them like a cloud in the sky, accepting that this is how I'm feeling right now, and maybe even saying to yourself, I won't always feel this way. This too shall pass. And like physical sensations in your body, notice that you're breathing. Perhaps notice the warmth or the coolness, or maybe even tension. Again, see if you can just notice those sensations without judgment. Try to breathe through those sensations, knowing that those too shall pass. Now bring your attention back to your breath and back to the warmth of your body. And as you connect with your breath, know that you have a light inside of you that no one can take from you. Not even racism, discrimination, sexism, xenophobia, anti-gay bias, anti-trans bias. None of those can take your light away. Even when the world is trying to break you down, just know that you deserve to be here. Your life matters. And as you breathe, know that you are worthy of happiness, worthy of success, worthy of joy. You are allowed to be fully yourself, unapologetically, authentically yourself. You are strong, and you are allowed to have moments of softness and vulnerability. Be gentle with yourself. Honor yourself. As this exercise comes to an end, take a deep breath in and breathe out, I matter. Take another deep breath in and breathe out, I am enough. Take a couple of more deep breaths in and out. And then, when you are ready, just allow your eyes to open and expand your attention back to the space around you. Thank you all. I encourage you all to use the chat room just to, if there's a phrase or a word or however you're feeling, I encourage you to type it in the chat room. Thank you. I see some people say peaceful, at ease, relaxed, empowered. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lamartine. I'm really happy that all you guys seem to be really enjoying that exercise. I know it really helps me. We just wanted to add it in there because we know there's a lot of anxiety around COVID. So as we get into talking more about COVID, we kind of just wanted to center ourselves. So I know we're all pretty familiar with it by now, but it was declared a global pandemic in March. And there's obviously just been a lot of disparities that have been revealed through COVID, and that's what we're going to be talking more about later.
Okay. Oops, wait. Okay. So I think that, not to sound redundant, I mean, this is not anything new, just kind of like some of the symptoms of COVID. Something that I do want to highlight on this is looking at this graph right here. As you can see, the symptoms of COVID or some symptoms of the flu oftentimes mirror those of COVID. So just being mindful. I do want to bring your attention to just kind of like being mindful that, loss of taste or smell, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or shortness of breath. If you are experiencing any of these symptoms, I encourage you to kind of like follow the guidelines of the CDC. Definitely contact your medical provider. And if you don't have one, because we are aware that not everyone may have one, if you're feeling really ill, check yourself into the hospital. At the end of the day, just do whatever you need to do to keep yourself safe. And if that's going into the hospital, then that's what you need to do. And if you're needing more information on the symptoms of COVID, we encourage you to check out the CDC's website. They have a lot of information that can be very useful to us.
Okay, and then going into how COVID spread, we hear that 6 feet distance really often, and that's because that's the most infectious way that COVID spreads. It's the most common way that it spreads. So that's why we don't want to be in close contact with people, because when we breathe or when we sing or when we talk, those respiratory droplets, they can be carrying COVID. And then that's how you transmit it to other people, or other people can transmit it to you. And there's even evidence that the 6 feet apart distance isn't enough. So that's also something to be very mindful of. And then next, a less common transmission is airborne. So that's when these respiratory droplets that may contain COVID are just lingering in the air, waiting for someone to walk through, and then you can inhale them. So that's why there's this emphasis on not being in enclosed spaces. That's why we see the outdoor dining. That's why we see that gyms are moving their equipment outside, just to help people stay protected from this, from transmitting this way. And the least common that we know of right now is the contact through contaminated surfaces. So I know in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of anxiety around going to the grocery store and touching everything, which I'm sure there's a lot still, but this has been shown to be the least common way of transmission, but still be very cautious. And people can be asymptomatic, so they can have COVID and they can be transmitting the infection to you, but not showing any symptoms. And there's a lot of people like that. A lot of people in my family have been asymptomatic, not knowing that they're spreading COVID. And you can be symptomatic, so you have symptoms and you're still spreading, or you can be pre-symptomatic, where your symptoms have not yet started, but you're still able to transmit the virus to other people.
Okay, so let's get real, right? The health disparities that we're seeing in COVID, they didn't just pop up in 2019, right? So within the Black community, these health disparities have been here way before COVID. But one thing we will get into kind of later on is just kind of like nothing in modern history has really highlighted or shined a light on some of these disparities like COVID has, right? And so that's what makes COVID kind of, I guess, special in a way, amongst many other things, right? Is COVID has really shown this light that's like, well, you can't deny this even if you wanted to. And so like pre-COVID, the health disparities were lower access to healthcare, lower SES. And so a lot of Black folks and other communities of colors are oftentimes found in these so-called essential positions. And when I say the word so-called, I'm not using it in a derogatory term, none whatsoever. And also there's like a leading cause of death within Black communities. We have high rates of heart disease, cancer, and also unintentional injuries. And also social determinants of health are also disparities, right? When we think about food deserts, oftentimes in Black communities, the closest grocery store is not within walking distance. But what is within walking distance is a convenience store, a liquor store, a 7-Eleven. Not that I'm picking on 7-Eleven, but all those businesses are within walking distance, but they don't sell healthy foods, right? Yes, you can get your I don't know, my partner loves glazed donuts. You can get your glazed donuts there. You can get your bear claws or barefoot, whatever they're called. You can definitely get those there, but those things are not healthy for us, and we're consuming all this unhealthy food, and it's not good for us. Also within Black communities, housing is also another social determinant of health, where, you know, the housing, not even the building itself, but just thinking about the areas, right? They're not the safest and they're not the best environments for us physically, emotionally, nor spiritually. And then another, you know, health disparity for Black communities is anti-Black racism. Not that racism is just kind of like, not that racism is only found in Black communities, but, you know, it is a very big health disparities that impact multiple communities of color. And of course, within Black communities, we have anti-Black racism, and that comes with a whole other sets of health disparities that we would need a good 2 years of worth of presentation to discuss to really get in it. But we won't do that today.
Yeah, and still touching on these disparities. So like Dr. LaMartine said, a lot of BIPOC folks, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color do have a lot of pre-existing conditions. And previously, the CDC thought that the only pre-existing conditions that made people more vulnerable to COVID were diabetes and being immunocompromised. But we know now that there's this whole list of other things. And like Dr. LaMartine said, a lot of these pre-existing conditions are very prevalent in the Black community. So we're already predisposed to be more vulnerable to COVID. And we're also seeing, as she said earlier in the last slide, that a lot of disparities have been impacted, such as the health outcomes of Black people who have COVID, the access to resources and care, exposure through employment. That's where we talked about that is the idea of being an essential worker. And we're going to talk about a little later, the vaccine reception as well. And I know there's, yeah.
Were you going to get to that?
Yes, but you can get to it.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to stop your shine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like we talked about, Black and POC have higher rates of these chronic diseases. And we actually have statistics that Black people suffer from diabetes 77% more likely in African American populations and 66% more likely in Latinx populations than white populations. So we are predisposed to these conditions at higher rates than white Americans, which is a disparity. Dr. LaMartine, I don't know if you want to add a little more about that.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. One other thing I would add is thinking about sickle cell disease, right? Where it's estimated that about 100,000 Americans currently have this diagnosis. But when we look at Black communities, 1 out of every 365 births will either have this diagnosis or show traits of it, right? And this is compared to 1 out of every 16,000 Latinx births, right? And so as you can see, like 1 out of 365, like that's a lot, right? And so again, you have to ask yourself, you know, what are some of these reasons? Like, why are we seeing some of these disparities? It could be that maybe Black folks just are careless, right? Maybe they're just not eating healthy. Maybe they're just making wrong decisions. Maybe it's all on them, or just maybe there's more to that. And so just thinking about, again, with health disparities, we also have to look at economic standpoints. So it's common where low income communities have lower access to healthcare. In America, low income communities typically are racial and minoritized groups. And so African Americans, Latinx groups, and Indigenous people. So just looking at the LA County residents. So there was a 2016 survey that found that the median income for LA County residents was a little over $55,000. But when you looked at Black family, the median income was about a little over $40,000. And in 2019, though Black folks make up 8% of LA County residents, they also accounted for over 34% of homeless populations. So even there, you're seeing health disparities in terms of like economic opportunities and also financial insecurities.
Okay, then to talk a little bit more about COVID-19 and race. So we see that despite Black folks having higher education or lower education, high SES or low SES, or being very healthy or not very healthy, these did not serve as protective factors for the community. It doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter. And second, we see that Black and Indigenous Americans are the highest rates of loss in America. And even though Black people make up about 13% of the population in America, we are 16.8, almost 17% of all deaths known of the race. We see that death toll has exceeded 1 in 750 nationally, which when you kind of think about it, it doesn't seem like a huge number, but just to go back, Black people aren't a huge part of the population. We're still a pretty relatively small part of the population. And we see as of yesterday, over 55,000 Black Americans have lost their lives to COVID. And I just wanted to add in this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. because I thought it was very fitting on this slide, where he said, all the forms of inequality, injustice, and health is the most shocking and inhuman.
So this is where we're at now. I think something I just want to point your attention to is just kind of like, let's focus on the California deaths. And so like looking at California, again, as Dominique mentioned, it may not seem like, Black folks are dying at an alarming rate, but considering that they only make up a very small percentage of the population, it is, it is alarming. So if we look at LA County alone, where over 1,300 deaths have been Black. And then, because these numbers are constantly changing, we put this, the last time we checked was yesterday, and I'm certain if we were to check today, it might have changed. So if you hear I say over, that's that reason, because we don't know, I don't know what they are right now because they might have changed. Okay, so earlier, I mentioned this idea, like, why are we seeing these health disparities? Is it that Black folks were just being careless, or is it because we're not eating healthy? Like, is it because we're doing something, or could it be something else? And so we want to open this up for audience engagement. So we would like for you to text Samantha Lama to 223. To this number right there, and even like take this poll and just based on your understanding or just kind of like your thoughts, like what are some of these reasons for these disparities that, and these are just some of the disparities that Dominique and I have covered today. I wonder if we have the link.
Yes, I put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to just click on the link. You can also do that.
Okay. I'm seeing racism. I'm seeing Tuskegee, prejudice. Excuse the ones that say test. That was just Dominique and I making sure that it was working. I see white people, and I wanna say more on that. It's not necessarily white people, it's the idea, it's like whiteness as an ideology, right? So just understanding that in America, whiteness is considered the standard, right? And so, and also the way America function, it favors whiteness over every other racial group. And so it's not necessarily white people per se, but this ideology of whiteness and ideology of white supremacy. I see prejudice, access, that's a big one. Barriers, inequality. Yeah, these are some really great reasons. Power, distrust, absolutely. Even mistrust of the healthcare system, barriers within the healthcare system, and access, that's a big one, right? Access to medical care. And also something that I think is on here, just kind of like access to culturally appropriate medical care, right? So I work in a healthcare setting, and do patients, for the most part, our patients have access to us, or we've made it to where we will go pick patients up. So those patients have access to us, right? But if they don't have access to quality and culturally relevant care, then it's not really going to serve them well. We're doing them a disservice. Okay. Education, that's definitely a good one. Anything else that stands out to you, Dominique?
I think the mistrust, and I think there was a distrust in there. I think that's a really big reason. And we're definitely going to get into that a little later too.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So now we're on the vaccine. So what about this vaccine, right? So far right now in the US, there's been 2 vaccines that's been authorized for protection against COVID. And so that's Pfizer and that's Moderna. I read today, or maybe I heard on the news today, that the Johnson one was seeking approval from the FDA. And so right now, Pfizer and Moderna, they both require 2 dosage. And so that's been like a limitation of those 2, right? And so the Johnson vaccine is proposing that they only need 1 dosage. And if you need more information, because neither Dominique or I are experts on the vaccination, I encourage you all to please go to the CDC. They do have like information in multiple different languages and ways that, and it is written in a way that you will understand it. So from our understanding, Johnson & Johnson is trying to put out their vaccine, and who knows, at the rate that things have been moving, they might have this vaccine approved by the end of this month. But nonetheless, all the vaccines essentially work in the same way. So they're trying to teach your immune system how to recognize and fight COVID-19 to build immunity, similar to how flu vaccines work, right? So you're taking the flu to kind of like help your immune system build itself so that way it can fight off the flu if you were to catch the flu. And I just want to highlight one thing, because I'm a member of the NAACP Boston chapter, and I'm part of the health committee. And we had a panel yesterday, or maybe like a talk to develop this panel. And there were some really passionate opinions about the vaccine, and particularly like Black people should get it. It was just kind of like one opinion. And this particular person was very passionate about her opinions, as she should be. And at one point, they made the comment, something along the lines of, right now people are dying, people need to set aside their values and how they feel, and they just need to get the vaccine. I, on the other hand, believe that the vaccine is one of many, I do want to stress many things that we all can do to protect ourselves, to protect our family, to protect our communities. It's one of many. And, we'll get to this later, but I just want to stress this. It's one of many. It's not the end all be all. Just be mindful. It's just one of many things that we can do for protection.
Yeah, and a little more on the vaccines. So we have Joe Biden's 100 million vaccines in 100 days. So thus far, we've administered 27 million, and in California, there's been 3.9 million. But we're still seeing that Black Americans make up a very small percentage, even though we are a large percentage of the people losing our lives to COVID. So we're making up almost about 6%, 5 to 6%. But that data is not complete yet. There's a lot of reasons, like, are we being denied the vaccine? I know there's a lot of mistrust about the vaccine. So some of the ways that they've been trying to combat this is, for example, we have Dr. Kizzy Corbett. She's a viral immunologist in the yellow dress. So she's a Black doctor. She's very young. She has a lot under her belt, and she actually helped develop the vaccine. And here in the picture, she is with Reverend Jesse Jackson, who marched with MLK. He was a very prominent civil rights leader. So just trying to gain trust from the Black community.
And, we've seen a lot of these images, right? One of my patients referred to it as propaganda, however you feel about it. But we've seen a lot of these where a lot of influential Black leaders are like taking the vaccine in a very public format. And yes, it is to engage and motivate, African Americans to take the vaccine. I'll leave it at that. Okay. So we were thinking about, the Black communities and the vaccine. Please don't judge me in my millions of tabs. That's how I think. And we have a quick YouTube. We won't watch the whole thing, but I do encourage you to watch it.
A lot of crazy things.
This vaccine can alter your DNA. It's too close to the mark of the beast.
Dr. Fauci, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question.
Yeah, let me just chime in here.
What potential side effects do we need to worry about? Why should the American people trust this vaccine?
So Bishop T.D. Jakes said, why should the American people trust the vaccine? And we're proposing, why should Black community trust the vaccine, right? And so from this video, again, I encourage you all to watch it if you have time. It's very informative, but Dominique and I went through the comment section just to see people's reaction. And we picked out the ones that stood out to us where, one person said, how do we know that everyone is receiving the same vaccine? Another person kind of like used this quote that's all very familiar in the Black community: all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Again, speaking to this mistrust, right? And someone said, Tuskegee, very valid point. Other people would have liked to hear from doctors who are opposed to the vaccine. And the last one right here really stood out to me. So this person said, I soon will be 74 years young, and I do have underlying health issues. However, I do have some untrust about the government. And these untrusts are big, right? These are not like small untrusts. And so this untrust is really what we're going to get to next. So what are some of these untrusts that, or mistrust that the Black community have towards the government?
Yeah, and this untrust and mistrust, it's real and it's very valid. Not even just the Black community, but a lot of communities of color have a lot of reason not to trust the government and their intentions. So we have a few here of the atrocious things that white America has done to the Black community specifically. So in the 19th century, we know that about 90% of Blacks in the South were slaves, and they were treated as subjects of abuse for medical experimentation. There was no consent, there was no compensation, no regulations, no rules, just disposable. And we see Western medicine has become synonymous with punishment. So we have physician J. Marion Sims, who is still known as one of the forefathers of gynecology. And he used to operate on enslaved Black women without anesthesia, the notion that Black people are immune to pain. And we still see that very present today. We see that Black women are oftentimes denied pain medication when they're giving birth, when they have surgeries. So it's still very prevalent, this notion that Black people don't feel pain. And his reasoning for performing these operations on Black women was because he wanted to perfect his procedure before performing on white women. And second, we have the U.S. Public Health Service syphilis study at Tuskegee, which is the full name of the Tuskegee experiment. I think it's important to use the full name and not just Tuskegee, because it kind of takes off the emphasis that the U.S. Public Health Service are the who did this and perpetrated it. So I know a lot of us are familiar with this, but it was when the Public Health Service, they allowed Blacks with syphilis to go untreated. And I know there's some comparison to this and the vaccine, but it is a little different, which Dr. LaMartine will touch on a little bit after this. And we also have Henrietta Lacks, who her cells were harvested without consent and they were donated to Johns Hopkins, and her family or her never received recognition or compensation, even though her cells are still used in research around the world.
I think you went over it, Dominique. One thing I will add is actually Dominique shared this with me where there was like some social media posts and, someone talked about the U.S. Public Health Service syphilis study at Tuskegee, and just kind of like making this comparison that, that study or that incident was about the exclusion of treatment. And then now COVID is just kind of like, and I guess their argument was, Black people can't use that as their justification for not taking the vaccine because that was about exclusion. And I disagree. I think Black communities have every right, anyone have any right to feel how they feel. But I feel like in this case, yes, maybe that incident was about exclusion of treatment and the violation of trust, right? The US government still had they still had a duty to protect the men that they still had a duty to treat them, and they purposefully withheld treatment and did not even inform, right, the people that they were withholding the treatment. So yes, I do think that there is a connection, and that connection is violation of trust. And so I don't know if you all remember when Surgeon General Adams, during a coronavirus task force briefing, he was urging communities of color to take precautions against COVID. And he said, don't do it for yourselves, but do it for your abuela, do it for your granddaddy, do it for your big mama, and do it for your pop. And, and he was later criticized for his use of slang. And he said his response was, no, I was literally using the language that I grew up in. That's the language that my family uses. And he's not wrong, right? So what he was really pointing to is this African-American cultural value of collectivism, togetherness, family, and friends that are actually used to shape behavior, right? That's really what he was getting at. African-American communities are often very communal in the sense of like, they are interdependent upon each other for providing a living, essentially survival. If you think about it, the family structure provided sustenance throughout the tumultuous Jim Crow, and also continues to do so today against white supremacy and other forms of violence against Black communities. African American community or family unit really exists within an extended network consisting of both people who are fictive relatives, people who are biological relative. Like, it's not uncommon for the community to have someone they just met, or maybe they're greeting them, to refer to them as cousin, as sister, as brother, aunt, uncle, whatever the case might be. And I do believe that we can use this cultural value of family to really keep our family safe, right? So if you respect your family, you respect the elders in the family, and you respect your friends and your loved ones, then it really is upon you to ensure that you are protecting yourself, not even just for you, but also for them. Like, I'm relatively healthy, I'm relatively young, so I don't fall within the vulnerable population. But what I do may have a direct impact on the kind of like the health of my family member, right? So if I go out and I do not adhere to CDC guidelines and I don't wear a mask and I come home and I bring it to my family, that's on me. That's something that I could have prevented. So I really do believe that within our community, we can use our cultural value of family to really remind us. So if you think about it, values really do shape and drive our behavior. So if we're just reminded of our values, then that'll help us guide our step, right? And so we can use that value to ensure that we're keeping ourselves safe for the sake of our families.
Okay, and another big cultural value in the Black community is religion. So about 83% of Black Americans identify as Christian. And the Black church growing up made like a lot of good memories when you're growing up, and I just can't really describe it, but they're centers of social support, and that's where you find your ethnic identity a lot of times. That's where you express your culture. Reading religious texts. I know, like, my grandma was always taking me to church. But this belief in a higher power, we talk about God's plan and how He's the giver of all good things, and it provides a sense of peace and acceptance of the present. I know Dr. Lamartine had a lot of really good things to say about this side, so I think you could say it.
Yeah, I really think we can use our cultural value of religion or spirituality just to kind of like provide us a sense of peace and a sense of acceptance of what's currently going on. But also too, like, I'm not one to quote the Bible. Like Dominique, my family I was gonna say drag, but I don't want to offend anyone, but my family, I was in church every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But I remember one thing that really stood out to me, if you are of the Christian faith, I do know that, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about faith without work being dead. And so this is just this idea that you can have the belief in a higher power. You can believe that, your higher power is in control of the coronavirus, is in control of what's currently happening. And what's also important to have is you have to do the work, right? So you can have this belief that, if God is your higher power, that God will look out for you, God will take care of you, everything will be okay in the end. And you have to wear a mask. Like, you have to do that. God gave you, if you are of the Christian faith, God gave you free will. So that's where the work comes in. It's up to you to do the work. And so I do think that just thinking about spirituality and thinking about family, cultural values, I do think that we can use those too, amongst many other cultural values, to really guide our steps and really guide our behaviors to ensure that we're keeping ourselves and our community safe. Okay, so we're at the end. And so again, we didn't want to kind of like we didn't want to overwhelm you with all the information, because this is all what the CDC has already put out, and this is all on their website. I encourage you to please go on their website. There's so much information, but just remember to wear your mask when you're going out. Just wear a mask. Some people say it's uncomfortable. Some people say they don't like it. All that can be true. So something can be true. It can be uncomfortable, and you can still wear it. Like, yes, it's uncomfortable to wear the mask for some people. Yes, it's annoying to wear it. Yes, that is very much valid, and how you feel about it is valid. And you can also choose to wear your mask as well. Making sure you're washing your hands, 20 seconds, make sure you're washing your hands. Just like Black folks, just like we be washing our chicken when we first get it, make sure you wash your hands. Make sure to watch your distance, keep that 6 feet distance, and making sure, like, I know when I go to the grocery store now and I get in line and someone is standing right behind me, I just turn around and I give them a look like, please, can you please step back? And when they, if they decide that that's where they want to stand, I can't control their behavior. I can only control mine. So then I'll move up a little bit further from them, because again, I want to keep myself safe. And please, please, please get tested, know your status. And, if you're feeling ill, please contact your doctor or go to the ER, do whatever you need to do to keep yourself and your family safe. Okay. Anything you want to add, Dominique? Okay.
No, I think you covered it.
So that is the end of our presentation. And so we would like to open it up. I think we have about 10 minutes. So we would like to open it up for any questions, some discussions, and some thoughts, some feelings, or better yet, maybe like in the chat room, if you wouldn't mind, maybe, how are you? Let's do a check-in. How is everyone feeling right now? Now that we're towards the end of this.
Well, I have a comment and a statement, and because I always have something to say, so there it is. I first of all would like to thank you all for putting together this presentation. It is exactly how I feel. The cultural aspects of it are exactly how I feel. I have extreme mistrust. I am not a guinea pig. I have anxiety about going to the store. My parents are in their late 60s, and I don't even go anywhere. I don't go out anymore because I'm like, the coronavirus. And when I do, I'm like, people are buying me. I start kind of like panicking because of, like, I don't want I have a mask and a shield on because I'm like, I can't catch it and then bring it home to my parents. Well, my parents live in a separate household, but I still would like to see them. And just everything that you talked about was so culturally relevant with the aunties and the uncles who aren't actually related. So I'm digressing, but thank you for putting together this presentation, because it really brought the Black cultural feel to it, because that's exactly how Misty, a Black woman, feels. So thank you.
I just want to add that, like the anxiety that you speak of is so common, Misty. Like, I mean, it resonates with me. It's so common. Like, I work in the medical setting at a hospital, and most of my patients, and this is regardless of race, but there's just so much anxiety. And so I want you to know that you're not alone. Like, there's a lot of crap going on. Every day it's something new. And so the anxiety that you're talking about, it's like, you're not alone.
Thank you. We have some comments some commentary going on in the chat room.
Yes. Dr. LaMartine, I think you can answer that a little better. It's from Annalisa. She says, can you please describe or provide examples of what is culturally appropriate or sensitive healthcare?
So I feel with that question, it really is dependent upon, what it is that you're treating, right? But something that remains true, right? So like, for culturally appropriate care in the healthcare setting is like, I always go into all of my sessions understanding that I need to listen. And I may have knowledge, or I may be an expert on anxiety, on depression, on whatever my patients might be going through, but I'm not an expert on my patients, right? They are the experts of their life. So I go into every session just kind of like ready to listen to them, because I need to hear what they are finding to be most concerning for them. And so from there, like I often tell my patients, let's co-create, let's co-create something that you feel comfortable with, I feel will be helpful for you. And from there, we can just check in with each other. So that's typically how I approach my patients. But then again, I do understand that it is patient specific, because I also work in psychosis. I take a completely different approach in that, because maybe my patient may not have enough insight to be able to engage with me on that level. So I think for me, one thing I always remember is that I am not the expert in other people's lives, and I have to also make space, making space for patients to be able to be their full authentic selves, which requires that I have to show up my full authentic self, right? And so Dominique and I were talking earlier, and I said to her, I can't check myself at the door before I walk into every patient. You know, I have to be able to bring who I am, because that's how I will do my best work. And so also making space for patients to be able to present as their full authentic self, and just being culturally competent, just making sure that if you make a mistake about any parts of the patient's social identities, just owning up to it, and not making that become the topic of the session, but just own up to it, and keep moving, and just keep providing the quality of care that we're all capable of providing if we just put some thought into it.
I have a question.
Any other?
Yeah, Dr. Lamartine, Dominique, beautiful presentation, very timely. Yes, round of applause. You know, as you know, I think COVID has really shed the light into issues of systemic racism and discrimination, and institutionally embedded, you know, systems of oppression and whatnot. And as you know, our institution, Laverne, is not excluded from that, right? And we've had conversations at our institution about some of these things. And I'm wondering, you know, from this COVID pandemic, what kind of conversations should we as faculty or staff be having with our students to confront some of this anti-Black racism, racism in general with other communities of color? I don't mean to put you to solve our problems. I don't want that. I think just, I guess, providing a framework or some food for thought for us, because these issues are real, right? And they impact us.
Dominique, as a student, do you want to take a first? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I also want you to shine, because I know you know the answer, or you have some thoughts. Would you like to share your thoughts with us?
I think as a student, I look for my faculty, or maybe even like as worker, I would look to my supervisors to be mindful that we are living in unprecedented times right now. It just seems very hard to focus on such mundane things in my work life, because I also work. And as a student, I often just don't see like a lot of empathy from the professors. I sometimes feel that they kind of forget that we are living in these times, and it's hard for us, and our families have, like my family has had COVID while I'm in class, and I just don't really know how to communicate that, because it almost seems so normalized now that I can't really like say that this is happening with me. So that's been really hard for me to kind of get over with my faculty and supervisors.
One thing I will add in terms of like the discussion the faculty can be having amongst themselves, I attended this presentation yesterday by Dr. Carlton Green. He does a lot of work on, Dr. Garcia, I see you shaking your head, but he does a lot of work around like racial reckoning, and just kind of like a lot of work within institutions, and kind of like helping their diversity department or diversity committees. And so one thing he said to me that I hadn't considered of before, and I felt like he was speaking directly to me, he said, you know, we have to change our mindset. He was speaking to like Black folks in the audience, like we have to change our mindset. We have to let go of this notion that we own race, right? So oftentimes when the topic of racism comes up, I feel like, and I think this could be applicable to like maybe community people of color might feel like they own that topic. And he was encouraging the white members in the audience, like, no, you have a piece of race as well, and how you think about race also impacts you as much as they impact your colleagues. So in terms of like what faculty can do, I am a proponent of affinity groups. I know some people do not like it. I really feel like, at least the settings that I've been in, when I felt that the most work had occurred. When I was able to be with other Black or other brown folks and we talked about our experience, and white folks was able to be in their spot and they were able to talk about their experience and they were able to be validated by their peers. Because as a Black woman, I'm sorry, when we're talking about race, and I will say this, sometimes I do feel like I own race, which I don't. But you know, when the topic of racism does come up, I don't want to be the one to validate you. I don't want to be the one to hold your grief or hold your tears for you, because I have to be that person for me every day, 365 days a year, and I don't have any capacity to do it for you. But when I've been in those settings, that position has been forced upon me, and that's just more emotional labor that I barely have enough for myself, so I don't need to be in that role. So I like the idea of having these different groups where you can feel validated, supported by people who may share your experiences. And then the second part that I don't feel is often done is we have to come back together. What have we learned in these respective groups? We have to come back together again, because talking about racism, it really is, we have to co-create like solutions. We have to come to some type of resolution. And I do think that we do have to come together. I don't think Black and brown and people of color have the answers for racism. We didn't create it. We don't have all the answers for it. I do think that it's something that we have to collectively do. And the second, I guess another related to that, you have to put the work into action. Simply talking about it, let's read a book, let's do this, great. How is that going to ensure that your Black students, your brown students, your BIPOC students, how is it going to ensure that they feel protected if you're not actively putting the work? Like, they're not. Like, all you did was come together, you felt good about yourself, we patted each other on the back, and that was it. So I want us to move away from that and really be about action. Dr. Nakamura once said, maybe I heard this in her class, just this idea that, being an ally is a verb. It's not a noun. You don't just call yourself an ally. You have to, first of all, you have to earn at that title. And by earn it, you earn it through your actions, and your actions have to be consistent too. You can't just a one time say something. It has to be consistent. Will it be hard? Maybe. It might be very difficult for you. And just because something is difficult doesn't mean that we don't do it. You still have to do it. Those are just my thoughts.
And I know that Dr. Zandra Wagner, I know she was on the Zoom. I'm not sure if she is still, but she actually hosts workshops. Well, I've seen her host in the past workshops on whiteness. So to help white people deal with this society, the racialization, which it's always been, but she helps you deal with it. So I encourage you, oh, hi, Zandra, I see you still here. I encourage you to participate, because Zandra is not just an ally, she's an advocate, she is an accomplice, and she is a person that really has done the work and will be more than happy, which look, I'm having her do more work. I'm sorry, Zandra, but she does, this is what she does. And I've seen her do it before. And when we brought in Tim Wise, he also discussed it. So you can Google Tim Wise, look up some videos. He is a white man who talks directly to white people about, having to do some work in order to understand these things. So we're not bashing white people. Don't think that this is an anti-white place. It's not. It is anti-racism and anti-white supremacy.
I know we're out of time, but I did want to thank everyone for coming and for engaging with us. And I really hope that this was a good use of your time. Well, I'm in Boston, so I'm tempted to say this afternoon. So I really hope this was a good use of, well, that is true. This is a good use of your time. Dominique and I are so grateful for you and your willingness to spend this time with us.
And I appreciate you all too. Thank you so much. We have kicked off our Black History Month. We're going to call it Black Our Story Month. And look for the calendar. We have more things to come. There is on February 10th, the College of Arts and Sciences is putting on an event. And then next Friday at the same time, we are having a Black Mental Health Matters event. So look forward to seeing you all. Peace and blessings. Happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye.
Since I'm the host, do I stop recording?